Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Okay, starting in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello all. Welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I want to start off with the classic disclaimer that this podcast is not a substitute for a licensed mental health therapist, work, or professional. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes. So please seek out a mental health professional in your area to work on your unique issues. Now, that being said, I know you, for all of you who have been listening, you notice we have a bit of a gap in the recordings that related back to San Diego Comic-Con. So I'm pleased to bring you not one, but two of my fellow panelists from San Diego Comic-Con again, especially for this period, which we are recording here for February, which is Black History Month, and I like to think of it as Black Pride and also Black Excellence Month too. And our two guests today are an example of that Black excellence, but also that Black excellence we don't always get to see and hear about, especially in the world of geekdom. So today's guests are David Hooker and Natasha Lee. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, pleasure to have you. I'm glad you were able to be here. So normally I read the bios, but this time I'm going to let you guys take care of that. So who wants to go first?
Alrighty, sounds good. I'll jump in if you don't want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sounds good. Okay, my name is David Hooker. Currently, I am a product manager at the Walt Disney Company. So I work with our studio branded sites, which is a fancy way of saying the websites like Disney.com or StarWars.com, ones that, have characters or licensed franchises. I am a little bit about me. We or us. I say me and then I immediately say we. We're originally from the East Coast. We are now in the LA County area. Went to a historically Black college, Bowie State University in Maryland. Grew up in that sort of Maryland area where I was kind of surrounded by a lot of Black affluence. Prince George's County is one of the most affluent Black neighborhoods in the country, and Black communities in the country. And so that's interesting. We may get into that a little bit as well too, right? How that kind of shapes your identity and things. But so came from there, studied theater, taught for a number of years, and then decided to shift gears, and we packed it up, drove over out here, started building a network, and then we're able to find our respective jobs in industries that we love, because we are super into things like, sci-fi, anime, comics, and video games, which is a good way into Natasha.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I am Natasha Lee, and I am a Senior Development Support Analyst at Insomniac Games. So I work in the video game industry. And so as we were starting this podcast, I want to say that our puppy has seen that we set this up and it has gone rogue. So she's trying to do everything and anything to get our attention. And so, I've been a fan of video games my entire life. And I always kind of feel like I came out the womb playing, I had a controller. I feel like I've always been with games. And growing up, it was not something though that I knew that I could do as a career. And it wasn't until I went into, the workforce that I was kind of looking for what I truly wanted to do with my life. And a series of things, like that we'll go into, with meeting David, who became very supportive of my choice to want to do art. I'm an artist, and also just my love for video games, he became very supportive of. And so I was able to follow into that path. And so I joined the industry working at Respawn Entertainment, working on Titanfall 2. And then I transitioned to Insomniac Games, working on Spider-Man. I've worked on Miles Morales. done some work for that game and the Ratchet and Clank series. And then now we're on to Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine. So very exciting projects coming up. And I just feel like video games have shaped me, and it has been something that I've feel like I want to help do for other people. I want to give that same kind of experience back to others. And so I met David at an HBCU, Bowie State University, and that experience as well helped shape the person that I am today, and helped me foster a community that was very accepting of my geekdom, of being into anime and video games and rock music, things that didn't really, a lot of my Black cohort, when I was moving around, because I'm a military brat, they found it odd. I was the weird kid. I was the white girl, because I'm also of lighter skin. So that became part of my identity that I tried to either fight or hide going into the industry, but I found it more accepting than I thought.
Gotcha. And you also got into sort of how you got here, some questions in the same order, which works perfectly. And I also had to compliment you because, again, we're recording this just after Halloween, and I did see the pictures you posted of your Halloween costumes, which were from an anime series. Which one?
Demon Slayer. So he dressed up as Nezuko. David dressed up as Nezuko, a character from Demon Slayer, and then I dressed up as 02, which is a character from an anime called My Darling in the Franxx. And then we also dressed up our puppy as Chibi Moon from Sailor Moon.
So I think that it opens up to a very interesting place. And I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on the relationship that exists between people of color, especially African Americans, and anime? Now, I know I've been listening to a number of other people who talk about it, but I'm kind of curious, what's your guys' take on that?
If you don't mind me going first, because I think that also I attribute the same thing to video games. I think that anime is such a deep genre. Like there's slice of life, there's horror, there's action adventure. There's now a lot of animes that kind of go into jumping into another reality, another world. And I think that kind of attaches to Black nerds, or a lot of Black people who don't even say that they like these things. I feel like as I've gotten older, I've met so many more Black friends and family members that were always into anime or had been, but they never felt like they could express it. And I think that it's just like this world is kind of detached from the world that we live in as Black Americans. And I think that it creates kind of this escapism, and you get a lot of stories in anime that are about, heroes that start in downtrodden situations that overcome them and become better. And I think that very much attaches to like the Black identity of having, come from enslaved people who have now created, a lot of things that affect multiple industries around the world. And you get kind of that, I think that there's a bit of that attachment when we do watch anime. It's like we can kind of, a lot of these characters come in a number of different styles, even though they can almost always be a little bit white facing in some styles or some stories. But I think that because of that, we're still able to attach ourselves to those characters, because some of the situations of them being disenfranchised or being disadvantaged or not being as strong as they could be, or having a system that prevents them from doing things, I think it speaks to Black people on a subconscious level.
I'm not going to say you stole my answer.
Wow. I mean, we think so similarly.
But that is a really big part of what I think really attaches a lot of, Black people who are into anime. Like it really hits home. And again, almost in that unconscious kind of level, right? I kind of consider it kind of like the notice me senpai or acknowledge me kind of ideology, right? Like we've seen a number of anime, particularly I would say one that is extremely popular and kind of introduced a lot of American audiences, and I would say even American male audiences, being Dragon Ball Z. And you look at or Dragon Ball, right? And you look at a character like Goku, and you see this guy who is an alien. All intents and purposes, he's not from here. He's an outcast. He's an outsider. And he has to kind of learn how humans socialize and do things, right? But it doesn't stop him from fitting in. It doesn't stop him from becoming a member of a community, right? Then, Master Roshi and everyone around him, right? And I think that piece really speaks to us feeling almost that second-class citizenship that historically pervades a lot of our situations as Black people now. And so when you see a character able to transcend out of that, it's really encouraging. It's kind of almost like a tale that you want to see happen for yourself too. I kind of also attribute that to like Naruto as well, right? Another positive and well-known anime where you have this character who, again, outcast, and through grit and determination and continue, never kind of giving up, he's then able to become, this prominent member of society, one of the most prominent members of their community. And it's something that we kind of
or just how people begin to accept him as a person
once
they get to know him. There's like a lot of stereotypes around Blackness, and they're mostly negative stereotypes. Like we look at other communities or other groups of people, and they're always these pseudo positive stereotypes in some instances, but a lot of the stereotypes associated with Blackness can be negative. And so you start off with a character like Naruto, who is seen as like dangerous. They he's unpredictable. They don't know what he could do to their community. They also associate him with loss in their community. And so seeing him overcome those labels, I think too, really reflects a lot in the Black identity.
Right. And to your point further, right, like if we were to strip away some of the more deep pieces, right, there's just a visceralness to a lot of anime that you see, right? And the visual aesthetic that you love. It's
so contrast to what we have in American cartoons.
And the I would say the episodic nature compared to American cartoons, where you get like
very sporadic,
your G.I. Joe. You could watch any episode of G.I. Joe in any order except for like 2 specials that happened in the course of the series, right? Whereas these shows, it kind of hooks you in because you're watching, you're growing a progression with the character, and that increases buy-in, and you want to see what happens next, and for so on and so forth. I'd almost attribute some of the longer ones to kind of like a soap opera, right, where the story just keeps going, but there's spots where you can hop in, but it's so entertaining, right, to see this next piece, or that you want to keep going. And I think that could be like almost universal, that infectious nature of it too. But us as Black folk, we really like a good story, I think. And I think
we like a champion we can rally behind, because I think too that's why Black people became so invested in Bruce Lee, and he was so welcoming of them into the community of martial arts, when so many traditionally martial arts is for Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, that's their it's housed in their communities, and for Bruce Lee to break that and kind of bring it to others, and then especially Black people still being pushed out of swimming pools or whatever, for them to be able to go and practice under him.
Very nice, and very well put. I'm sure there's a number of people who are going to be having a chance to really stop and think about that. But one of the other things you guys mentioned, too, was the aspect of how many other family members now you discover are also fellow geeks.
Oh yeah, it's wild. So my brother, my late brother, he passed, but my brother was also a Bowie student. It's very odd seeing the parallels after you kind of step back and think about him. My brother, 14 years my senior, and he went to the military was in the Navy before he went to Bowie. But before he had gone to the school, I knew that he was into comics. I knew he was into art. I knew he was into video games, right? And so those were some core pieces that I kind of almost, kind of looking up to your older brother. I was like, there must be some reason why he's interested in these things. And then that was kind of the seed that sparked me to also grow my interest, right? So at a very early age, I started to draw, watching him do drawings.
But you also think that it wasn't like the most receptive amongst the family?
Oh, no, not at all. That was another interesting piece, right? These interests that he kind of collected over time and were different than the other interests of I say the traditional member of the family who like, their R&B music and their,
sports games,
football and a lot of things that just spoke to the almost the narrative that we are told we're supposed to like, right?
Yes.
So he kind of was one of those first figures in my life anyway that was like very mold breaking as it relates to those interests, where it was just like, these are quirky and weird. And I think his impression upon me, my sister, who is older but still younger than him, both of us were also sort of impacted by that. Like, I think he called her Yoda when she was born. But like those interests, you kind of find these people in their little microcosms, right? It's almost,
I mean, it's basically how we experienced our college life.
Yeah.
And because growing up, I moved around a lot, and then most of the community of people, when I was in school, I didn't really see a lot of people I didn't see a lot of Black women or Black girls that were into video games, or besides my sister. Like, I have a god sister that she was my twin. Like, we both loved comics, anime, and video games. And we were both kind of not, I think she experienced more of being outcasted a little bit amongst her peers, but it was just kind of like seen as, oh, you're Natasha, you do that weird thing. You like games and you read these, newspaper print drawing books or, manga and it was just kind of like, oh, well, I guess, it's just me and maybe like 3 of my other friends in the entirety of the school that kind of bond over these subjects or these games. But as I got to college, we formed a larger cohort of friends that were just all into it. And it was like, wow, I constantly heard that, oh, why are you reading that? Or why, like, oh, you play games, why? You're a girl. And I didn't get that reception from my group of friends that basically turned into family once I got to college.
And that group, I think, even when we look back to that group, it took a larger community, like a college setting where you're getting various a variety of like backgrounds, right? But also you're getting a piece that I would say is important, is that kind of academia, right? Like that kind of book smart, kind of nerdy piece kind of fits adjacently to geek culture in certain aspects, right? And so there we really started to see, oh, this person who is from this state, who also our buddy Sam from New York, who wore these really amazing shoes that he paints himself, but he was also
he would paint like video game characters or anime characters on clothing, and it was just kind of awe-inspiring. And again, our dog is now tipping over things to get our attention. But I would say too, like, as much as the internet is a web of horrors, it is also a beautiful, place to just gather and meet and learn about other people from all over the world. And I think, as problematic as Facebook can be, I was able to find Black Geek groups and Black girl gamer groups within Facebook, and just find these communities of hundreds of thousands of people that are Black and like anime and like video games and like, Japanese culture or other cultures outside of American or rap music or, designer shoes and things like that. So it's like these people, but it was just like they've always been there. Just like whenever I would hear people think that, oh, well, Black people don't like this thing or that thing. And it's like, but I do. I've been doing this for the majority of my life. It's all I've ever known. And I think with the advent of like a social media platform, you've been able to see so much more, that so many people like these things, especially amongst the Black community, that the Black community is so, like, I don't know, esoteric. Is that the correct word? It's just where we are a plethora. Eclectic. We are an eclectic group of people, no matter what kind of box we've tried to fit into, or people have tried to, our systemic racism has built around us. We constantly see Black people break out of that mold, regardless of them constantly saying we have to be this one way.
You give me pause to think about just music in general, right? Like, and our adaptation to music, the way that we introduce, rapping, the way that we introduce, these nuances and sampling from from older tracks and things like that, sampling from like Beethoven's, and all of that creativity too, I think permeates a lot of what we do, because they're kind of forced to seek out solutions or create solutions when we don't have them, right? And I think maybe that's another piece to the anime, or just that kind of culture, right, where it's like you see these characters who have to create solutions. The bad guy is just way too powerful. We got to figure out how to do this or that, and so it's something that we kind of attach to. And I think the more we think about it, the easier it is to see the parallels of the communities and just those kind of cultural.
And even going into video games, like I think that's even a step further, because you get to own that character, you get to play in that experience. And I think that, again, more Black people play video games than, and it's statistically proven that more Black people play video games. I don't have the current URL off the top of my head, but it's already been shown how much Black people have been involved with video games, but we've just been shown so little to be a part of the community.
And then just how much we consume entertainment in general, we kind of over-index. And that part is interesting too, because when you talk about games, we get into this idea of being this avatar. And for us, that tends to be that temporary escapism for this moment, for these 12 hours that this, the single player story is happening, right? I'm Kratos. I'm not David who gets dirty looks when he's walking down a particular street, or has women clutching him first when he's in the elevator with them. I get to just play out this reality, and it is kind of that escapism that I think we've really, really identified with, because there is so much that you kind of deal with. One of the things me and Natasha kind of chatted about was even roller coasters and
or thrill seeking in general.
Sometimes we can be adverse to thrill seeking, and it's because it's almost, when you're in survival mode all the time, you don't want to take a lot of chances.
Yeah.
It's like life is already thrill seeking.
Right. I made it past 23. I'm still here. I don't think I want to skydive, guys. I think I've tapped on my luck right there.
Right. Well, and the way the adrenaline, and I know there's going to be ways to be said, even as working as a therapist, because as lately I've gotten much more involved in playing things like Call of Cthulhu, which is much more horror games and so forth. And it's I'm not really that interested in Freddy or Michael and so forth. But, the psychological horror thriller over here, that one actually is interesting me. And some of that standpoint of also what I see as a therapist, looking at so many people's lives, it's my system's not up for that. I just want to go over here, have a nice warm bath.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
But to that also, and I'm kind of curious too, how does this translate into the career fields you guys both have? Because again, there's that place where we don't see a lot of ourselves in it. We don't see a lot of our families driving, also saying that this is a viable career versus, get in the NFL, get the record deal.
I think it's challenging once you're in the space too. Getting to the space is already challenging because you don't have the nepotism, to be quite honest, right? You don't have the exposure, right? So it's a lot of you figuring out how you even get into these spaces.
And again, without that visual representation of us in these spaces, it's hard for you to see yourself in them a lot of times. Yeah. I mean, unless you're surrounded by, positive influences from family or your circle that encourage you to just do what you want to do.
Right.
And I think too, when I try to be more vocal or more visible now that I am in the industry, I think it's because you don't know what you don't know. And that just keeps, you will follow the same trend normally if you don't have anything to break you off that path. And myself, I never thought that it never occurred to me, just go work in video games, just go study game design or something, because one, game design wasn't really a class at the time. And
it was exposure, to your point, right? We never were exposed to anyone making games, right? Up until the point that we started testing, that was us volunteering to test for like betas.
Right. And that was, it is just kind of like following the, oh, wow, games release alpha or beta programs where they can let players come in early, see how the game is developing, and then submit feedback. But even still, it was like, oh, yeah, that's a cool thing. That's what we get to do as gamers. It was never like, now let me see if I can make this my career field. Yep. Maybe I want to do like user experience and see how people do enjoy games at various states.
And then when we talk about like in our roles now, I think I'm in a very unique position, I would say, or I was in a unique position coming off of coming in before the kind of the issues with it gives me a chance to kind of think about like
about you being in your current
in my current space, getting there before the situations that happened with like George Floyd and the like civil unrest that happened amongst 2020 along with the pandemic, right? And a lot of companies shifting focus. I actually got to get in before then and kind of bear witness to the efforts of changing those dynamics and helping bolster, diversity in various spaces and various career paths and career development. Like I saw that work trying to be formulated, right? And then you saw this kind
just didn't have the push.
Right. And then you saw this huge catalyst, right? And then from there, it jump-started a lot of that work because I mean, I can tell you, I definitely would not have expected the amount of change in the amount of time that we've kind of seen without something moving us forward. And it's unfortunate that had to be the case, right? But to our benefit now, we're able to go and be speakers at panels, right? Like being able to go to like a Comic-Con or even like an Afrotech and things like that, where we've been able to, share our experience and really help grow our community, but also know that our respective kind of companies are also kind of encouraging some of that work and even leading some of it in various spaces.
And I think it attributes back to just looking inward. Once the, George Floyd's death, it kind of felt like, are we like that? Could we attribute to something like that? And I think it did help some businesses try to rectify that. And I think that even when as not having that opinion, or understanding of even just going into games, but understanding now how important it is to be visible and to continue to just start efforts to get more Black and brown people into these spaces, and especially, in my case, like more Black people. And it's just like me, I really only got into this industry because my god sister had been pushed to achieve what she wanted to. My family was very traditional. I mean, my mother was kind of like, sure, I support your art, whatever you like to draw, cool. But my father was very militant and just like, well, you need to follow these things. You need to get this kind of job. You need to marry into this kind of family. And I didn't do any of that. But it was like, but that was my path. I was going on that path. I wanted to do whatever, my father recommended. But seeing how my god sister and her mother and father just pushed her to be like, initially and through high school, they encouraged her to be a basketball player because she's very tall. And, but she was just like, I'm into games. I want to do something with games. And they did the research with her to help find ways to learn how to work in games, game design. She didn't really want to do programming, but wanted to do more design and environment art. And then she was kind of like my, along the lines of nepotism or, me seeing somebody already going in through this process. She went to the Game Developers Conference. She was sent there by her school. And so she was like, I know y'all can't afford this, but I know that there's a conference associate program that allows you to get a full ticket in exchange for doing some hours of work. And I don't think I would ever consider that without her guidance, without her being in that space to know that. And so now that I am in that space, that's what I try to recommend to others, because again, even when I was thinking like, okay, maybe I can get into games. Like, how do I do it? Who do I interview? We went to various studios like Bethesda, being in Maryland. We went to Bethesda. We
tried to go to Bethesda.
Yeah, we didn't get seen. We went to Big Fish Games. We had a modeler that was there that allowed us to kind of tour the space with him. He's a black modeler, a black 3D modeler. And then we had Firaxis, which makes like the Civilization games. And so it was like, okay, we're seeing this here, but it doesn't really feel like there's a way for me to break into that. And I constantly recommend that it is about who you know to get into a lot of these spaces. As much as you have skill, as much as you have talent, a lot of the times, I mean, people are recommending their friends and family because they know that they will work well with them. They are already experienced into what they can do. So I think that, you know, as much as, you know, we're like, nepotism, I think that is also people are just doing what they know. Yeah. They just know that these people are reliable and they can work well with them.
And for us, there's a level of demystifying that has taken place with us being in the spaces proper, right? Like, whereas if we were to talk to like friends and family, you know, as an example, right? If I were to tell family, oh yeah, I'm working at Disney, the thought that comes to their head is like, okay, so what character are you?
Yeah. Or what park do you work at?
Right. And then even with video games, like working in games, there's really so much folks don't know, especially from generational gaps, as far as like, all right, so you must be a programmer, right? You just program the computer because the games are computer games, right? And that's the depth of understanding that a lot of folks have between either of our positions. And so us being in the spaces now, we kind of can help break those down
into more attainable pieces. Because we know that you can be, you know, depending on your height or what level of skill you may have, that you can be a number of different positions in a basketball team, but no one's ever breaking down the video game industry. Like, who is the lighter? Who is the set dresser? Who is the matte painter for some of the scenes? Who is an animator? Who's doing storyboarding or VO or who's doing finance? Who is a facilities manager at a video game studio? Because all of these people still make up those credits. They still help the creation of this product. And I don't think that we go into the nuance of what really makes a video game. And even I would say within anime, because we don't see a lot of Black Americans really pursuing voice acting. And it's like, you can go into voice acting, you can go into translation, and you can be, you could work with those different American dubbing studios working in relation with the Japanese animation studios. And it's like, there's so many other components that, we've only been showing like the front facing, like, oh, you're either just a game dev who does programming or you're just an artist. Right. And there's so many other facets that I think just needs to be made aware. And then we also need to bring those into our school systems and then just into our homes when we're encouraging our children and encouraging our community to be able to be the best, know that they can do anything. They don't just have to be, an actor, a comedian, or a sports player.
And beautifully put.
Games and animation is very lucrative.
Yeah. And that's one of those things we can encounter too when and the therapy side of this, when we were dealing with some parents who feel like, the kid's spending all this time, and they talk about they want to be an influencer or they want to be on esports. And it's like, do you realize how much of an industry that is?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And again, even when I hear that, people trying to shy their children away from games, they either think that it's violent, all of the studies that have gone on for the last few decades have proved that there aren't these violent or negative consequences. Rather, the opposite, that people get better reading comprehension. They're able to have better motor skills.
They express more empathy.
They express more empathy because they experience so many different kinds of stories and character, as well as being more empathetic, sympathetic to people, and then as well as broadening who you know, because a lot of these games are online. So you're expanding your friendship group, you're expanding out of your state, out of your country. And when you're playing some of these games, we've met people from all over the world. And again, it's another way to find out like what's going on in their country, what's going on in their day-to-day life. And I think that people think that people who play video games are shut-ins, but a lot of us have a community way outside of just our immediate family or our immediate radius of people that we tend to talk to. And I think that makes it so much more wholesome in creating, somebody who is more readily, available to work in a workplace where they can deal with different personalities, because they've dealt with so many varying personalities on a video game.
But there's also there's also so much like exposure. Like when we talk about, just the role, and then the fact that there are a lot of lucrative roles, there are a lot of better opportunities, right? When you look at a football team or basketball team, look at how many folks are actually going to be playing on the team versus how many kids today you can ask and say, what do you want to do? And that be their profession, right? Comparatively.
Or you think about how many years people spend in such of an industry.
But comparatively, looking at a movie, that came out from Disney, right? Look at the credits and how many how many people are getting credited and getting a paycheck and, able to see themselves. And the same with games, and how many companies are outsourcing other companies that if you couldn't work in this one, you could potentially work in the other company, or, and just that level of exposure to how these things are pieced together is really, it's invaluable, right? It's things that folks who have been a part of these industries have known for years and years and kind of know subconsciously, right? And like something that we are emblazoned to teach our people, right?
Yes.
So that,
and us now being in like the LA area, we see how many people are just so comfortable with either being on screen, being on camera, working behind the scenes, because it's just normal to them. They always see people filming on the streets. They always know that, some studio or some site needs a PA so they can get in, to the industry that way. And it's like trying to make that feeling the same, that, it's just available to me. I know somebody who's a cameraman, or I know somebody that's a grip, and I could do that too. And it's like trying to make that the norm within our community, that, I can go into games. I'm a writer. Like, look at, again, even when we think about people who are rappers, I mean, you can translate, you can take that same skill set and bring it into writing, either if you're composing music for the game, composing different types of audio, because we look at people that make their own beats, and it's like, you can use that as sound design within video games. Or again, you could be a composer, or you could be, writing dialogue, or, just helping other actors or other artists, convey things better or differently. And I think that we need that, because our industry has been so white male driven. We need so much more of that.
And there had been so much of a barrier for that, like just in
economically having a computer.
30 years proper, when we started seeing a lot of folks doing things, right? It was very difficult the access required a level of affluence, right? You needed the money to have a garage to work on these games, and the money to buy a computer at that time because of how expensive it was. And now with the ease of access, we're trying to show kids and anyone, right, that you got a cell phone, you can learn how to do this. You got your laptop, you got a library card, access to the library, you can start learning and building in this industries, or these industries. And so that's just one of the things that we consistently try to push and promote, as we've seen the benefits of it,
And you're living proof of it. So I think that's a great place for us to take a break. So we're going to come back for the second half, folks, here on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with David Hooker and Natasha Lee. We'll be right back.
Do you have knots? Not the physical tightness in your neck and back, and not the ones on a rope, but metaphors for the helpful and unhelpful tugs in life that can help us ascend to a new level or stop us from falling too far back down. Join host Perry Clark for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, a program about mental health and its practice from an Indigenous person of color. We'll help you find the knots that help you and avoid the ones that don't. Listen for new episodes every other week on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it, so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information. You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingnotspodcast.com. That's pclark at untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Okay, coming back in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back, folks, for the second half of Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with David Hooker and Natasha Lee. So I know this is a question for those of you who are listening to my previous podcast with Marlene Stewart. One of the things that had come up at this time as we are on Twitter was a comment that was made about Black women not wanting to deal, not being interested, not being attracted to Black nerds. And your relationship is an example of a pair of geeks, nerds, and so forth, finding a happy relationship with each other, and especially nerds of color. So can we speak to a bit of that and that glory during this month of excellence?
I don't want to put any truth to this statement, but I will say that for both of us,
I'll be fired up.
Well, I will say that for both of us, our expected counterparts when we were much younger, definitely not weren't. I didn't expect to get married to a Black woman. To be honest, I didn't think I wasn't averse, right? But based on the interests, based on the expectations, and then based on sort of some of that kind of romanticization that I kind of have for like Asian culture, I definitely kind of perceived myself as being interested or following along that sort of path of dating or marrying someone
of Asian ancestry.
Yeah.
And I will yes. Initially too, when we first started dating, I was just like, my family's not going to believe this, because I'm not saying that there's Black women that are just, doing this generalization that Black women don't find Black geeks attractive. Again, with the association of me reading a lot of Japanese-based, animes and reading manga and thinking that I'm going to move to Japan. I figured that naturally I would meet somebody who's either Japanese, or my best friend is, my best friend in middle school is Korean. And I figured, someday I'm going to go to Korea and then, I'll probably marry a Korean man. And it just wasn't in my thoughts. And I do think that as I grew up as a kid, or, going into middle school and high school, the Black guys around me, they didn't necessarily find me the most, I wasn't unattractive, but I don't think that they wanted to date me because I was just geeky and weird. I wasn't like the typical, what we see displayed of like these heteronormative couples in our media. And but whenever I hear this statement and I try to say like, this is not necessarily true. I know tons of, I have Black geek friends and Black female friends that love Black men. And it's just that when they thought that they could get with a Black geek, they were met with gatekeeping. And I think that there's so much gatekeeping within a lot of the industry, especially when it comes to Black people getting into geekery, And
I would say that that's even, a byproduct of like just patriarchy in general, right? Like these interests are guy interests. Right?
Interests. So trying to express interest in a video game or an anime or some type of action movie, whatever. It might have been Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon at the time. And, somebody would be like, are you sure you really like these things? Are you lying? Do you know this? Do you know that? And so I think that maybe there were fewer Black women in that time period, because I think that it's more adult men that are expressing this nuance, because I think that
I think it's also
Gen Z or the newest generation is not going to have this problem. I don't think it's going to be as pervasive.
But to your point, I think another thing is there's not a lot of Black women that are willing to put up with that.
That's why I was kind of going to follow, because it's like once you receive that, one too many times, you're just put off. You just don't pursue. And even still, when I look at, all these groups on Facebook, I see so many happy couples. Black geeky couples. And I'm just like, there's a couple right there. They're talking right here as somebody's on the post like, oh, Black women don't like Black men. And it's just kind of the same could be said about so many groups too.
And when we look at our internal friend groups, again, starting from a lot of our collegiate friends and even earlier than that, like when I think about my core group of friends, even from high school and beyond, like they were all, interested in like the era of the X-Men 90s cartoon. It's hard to ignore how great, we kind of had it in that geek comic space too. And then with Star Wars and the prequels launched kids during that time. Like, so we all had those kind of geeky interests, and we're all, in my core, all married to Black women. And then moving forward, into that college, a lot of our friend group that we share as friends are also,
and they're all relatively geeky, and pretty much they've all married, a Black partner.
Which then always brings up the aspect, is this response really coming from someone who has no reflection and understanding or even respect for geek culture? And if so, then yeah, you're not going to be attracted to that, but that doesn't mean you need to be poo-pooing it.
Right. And I think there's a certain level of, there's a great TED Talk, I forget the name of the person, but she said, the issue with stereotypes is not that they're untrue, it's that they're only a slice of truth. And they don't tell you the whole story, right? So there is a slice of truth about certain geeky Black guys that you've run into who have this unclean hairline. They don't get their hair shaped up, and they look puffy, or they.
I think that's just kind of like the geek persona. I think that there's a Black version of the geek persona where they're not appealing. But
that's a piece of
right. And I didn't want to say not appealing, but I'm saying like they're some of the way that they approach people. It may not be
social cues.
There's social cues, and I think too that. Again, I don't see this so much when it comes from, I don't see a lot of Black women touting this response. And that's where it's just kind of like, I don't even see Black women being like, oh, Black men don't like, or Black geeks, and that, Black women saying, oh, I don't like Black geeks. I don't see that. And it's just kind of like, where's the introspection from this statement? Yeah. What were your lived experiences when you encountered, a person that you did want to maybe have a relationship with? I don't think there's enough introspections on the person's actions versus what the reality of the situation is. Absolutely. And also that, not everybody's going to like you. So just because you found some person that doesn't like you or doesn't like your hobbies doesn't mean that there isn't a person in your ethnic community that doesn't like you or that does like you. And it's just bewildering to me to constantly see this, because I feel like it's just such a nonsensical point of view when we have, when you could just try to pursue somebody. I think it may be your circle. And I hear a lot of people talk about, how men and women are these days with the advent of Tinder and Bumble or all of these kind of dating sites.
And it's more checklist oriented.
Yes.
Right?
And I don't think there's anything wrong with, having some things that you would like in a person, but I don't think that it should always be the end all be all. You never know. Like, again, I never thought that I never disliked Black men, but it just, because of my interest, I thought that my path would align me to someone who wasn't Black. But as soon as David and I met, we just clicked. And I feel like, people, they're not willing to be
give
persistent
and
give themselves the opportunity, because I think that, maybe it's your community, maybe it's your circle of friends. I think. But
I do think too, a lot of times it's the when you're meeting a person as well, right? Like when we met, was beyond, I would say, my most socially awkward years had been behind me, so to speak, right? So it could have, you could be introduced to folks who are still figuring that kind of social piece out, or just haven't found a community where they have felt like they could just be themselves too. Because I think that's another issue where people come in and they have this preconceived notion that because because this guy's a geek, this is how they kind of behave and perform, or this is, these are these like weird quirks that this person must have to be in these spaces. And like we said, until we run into something like our situation in college, our community, right, and people are able to just be themselves and open up and be, that's when you start seeing the heart of a person. And I think from surface, people aren't able to actually.
They don't continue again, because we do have this kind of like swipe left, mentality now. So it's like, oh, you didn't hit X, Y, and Z at the start, then you must not have those qualities. And we do joke all the time. We're like, if we had put ourselves say on what is that most popular one, dating site?
It's not Cupid. Which one is it?
It's kind of like the most like Harmony. Is it eHarmony?
eHarmony.
eHarmony.
Yep.
Yes. I was like, if we were to put ourselves into eHarmony, I don't think we would match. And I even, I would think like that's like a game I wish I could play. I'm like, I want to make eHarmony accounts and see if it would somehow
just for people who are already.
But then also, I think once David said that his kind of socially awkward stage or how he had been is different from how he was when I met him. So we also joke that if we were in high school, we probably would not have liked each other. And it's just kind of like there is a time and I think that there's timing when you do meet people, and it's nice that we met each other so young. We were 18 and 19 at the time, I believe. And we've been together for 16 years. And it's just like, it keeps getting better. And I wish people would, wouldn't get hung up on, well, people say that, Black geeks, Black women don't like Black geeks, or Black men don't like Black women geeks, why just take that, like rip that Band-Aid off. I feel like it's like a sword that's been stabbed into you from some bad experience, and you just won't take it out and mend it.
Yeah.
Because I think that, there is time to grow and heal from that and find someone that you do gel with.
Yeah, which also leads to the two thoughts that come from, at least from the therapy, one from the therapy side, and one we just need to consider, considering the world we live in now, is whether or not, keeping in mind that biological age and mental age don't always match.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. We can have people that are older than their biological age, but we can also, and I think we have a lot of people who are younger than their biological age.
Yes.
But the other one, which was the aspect dealing with the age we're in, is we need to make sure whoever is putting that quote out is not a bot.
Yes. And I think that too, because it comes up so randomly that it just makes me feel like, is this a means to draw, dissension? Because, for weeks and weeks, we're sharing funny memes. We're talking about the latest games coming out. And then somebody's like, oh, Black women don't like Black geeks. And it's just like, but why? Why did you have to say that? And it does. It almost seems like it's just trolling, and it's creating this kind of tension between the groups. And when it could just be a non-starter, just laugh it off and ignore it. Yeah. But it brings about so many of these, these measuring of the qualities of each, person. And it does, I'm not in forums with, just mostly Asian, Americans or Asian folks to see if there's any type of similar antics, but it almost seems, and I mean, I know that when you can be like, oh, I'm a mainlander Chinese, but I'm not, American born Chinese, ABC, something like that. I know that there's those types of nuances, but it just seems so much more toxic in the in the Black American community, but for no reason.
Well, I think the reason, like you were saying, is like there's a wound that people have, on the side of the person who might have said this initially, right, and then it being shared out, right. There's that wound that is still there and is still present, but there's also that wound for a lot of geeks, just in general, in the geek community, of being interested or attracted or caring for other people that didn't fall into lines of the typical social expectations. They weren't necessarily quote unquote cool. So they weren't those people that they may have been interested in weren't interested in them, right? But
I think that a lot of times, especially if it's looking at high school to early college, people are still trying to fit an image of what they're supposed to be, of what they're supposed to like, of who they're supposed to like.
And even in that same breath that they're, that they don't necessarily fit this mold that is sort of ideal, quote unquote, they're interested in a person who fits in that ideal mold.
Yes.
And it's like, you don't realize that you're doing what is being done to you is what you are adhering to.
You want
societally, this is the person that you're supposed to be interested in. And we're not, none of us are absolved of that perspective because that's just been what's been kind of fed and flooded into our psyche from a societal standpoint.
And I think that even in just regular, relationships in general, I think that there's not a lot of, talking about how relationships are really about growth. You're each going to grow as people, as you're in the relationship. No one's going to be perfect. No one's going to have everything that you like. No one's going to do everything that you want or like at the same time. Every single day we get sick, we lose our jobs, we get new jobs, we move, and it's kind of like, people have children, and those things shape you and change you. And you as a partner are choosing to be there with that person through all those different occurrences. And I think that when people are looking at relationships, they're just like, well, status quo. If I'm a Black male and I'm into, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, I want a Black woman who's also into Yu-Gi-Oh cards and she plays Call of Duty. But also, maybe she was just into anime, but she's never played video games. You don't know that she won't ever learn to want to play video games because people have cut them off at the checkbox, at the list. And it's just like, we're not showing that relationships are just about growth. You're growing with this other person, and it's helping shape you and shape them. I think that people are always like, well, I'm in this position, I'm at this state, I like these things, as if you will always like things. And I think too, when I think back to being a child and now as my adult times, I used to always play video games on the hardest difficulty. I almost thought that it was beneath me to play a game on like medium or normal. I was just kind of like, I'm a gamer. Like, I play things on the hardest difficulty. I have to beat it this way. That shows that I know what I'm doing. And then, now as an adult, I don't have time to play a game on hard. I don't have time to lose 5 times as opposed to once or not at all. And even as a child, when I used to ask my father, like, oh, let's watch Lord of the Rings. And he'll be like, we watched it yesterday. And I'm like, but I want to watch it again. And he didn't want to watch things multiple times in a row. And I always thought that was ridiculous. I'm like, if I like something, I want to keep doing it. But then now as an adult, no, when I find something, I'm like, you know what, I've already seen,
this was good.
This was great. I need to see something new, because there's so many more things I could have experienced instead of staying pigeonholed in just the things that I like and watching those over and over again and never, experiencing other things or having as much time. If I watch Lord of the Rings once a day instead of twice, I can watch, I can watch an episode of Stranger Things or something like that. And I think that, people, they're just kind of in one mindset, and I think that they're in a fixed mindset and not in a growth mindset. And I think that it has to be applied to all avenues of your life. And especially in the Black community, we're already pigeonholed into so many little boxes. And it's like, we can do nothing but grow out of these boxes. So why say that this one statement defines how Black people have relationships?
So normally I would ask the question about mental health and myths and realities, but I think you guys covered so much of that even without actually bringing it up. But you also spoke to so many of the truths and so many things that we also I often sit in therapy with people working with the aspect of moving them out of a fixed mindset into a growth mindset, looking at the aspects of, life and especially relationships. You got to go through all of these things. It's not all the sanitized Disney fairy tale, so to speak. Disney, but still.
And just,
And we deal with that. Like, we've seen other people too that, like, they think that Disney or romantic movies or whatever are ruining relationships. And it's like, but technically Disney has been around for 100 years. So did it just start ruining relationships, or,
Well, I would posit that aspect of the stories that they have rewritten in these sanitized forms are the things that are damaging. Can be very damaging in that standpoint. When you look at the original source material, those were moral lessons. They were life lessons.
More fable-esque. And like, I think it's really
right. And I do agree. I think we have less fable-esque stories being told, and we do have more of these, well, things are going to work out in the end. And I think that still keeping that mindset, though, I think still can help push you to like, well, I don't need to get stuck here. This relationship didn't end up like a Disney-esque one. So maybe there will be something if, I continue to, either work on myself or look at an example, like, why didn't my relationship turn out to be this kind of Disney-esque? And then what are things that do help shape relationships? And I think too, we just stop at the Disney movies and maybe don't pursue other avenues of research onto relationships. And
I think that's something that really does bother me. And again, coming from the mouse too, right? Like, it's there's a lot of the Kool-Aid of the storytelling. But I can say that, and like even for us, like our situations have never happened in any semblance of the movies or stories that we've kind of seen, as much as, life happens and there's your response. And then when you're in a relationship, there's that additional nuance of there's how your response is going to impact your partner or how your partner is going to respond. So how do you navigate? And so the thing that's really interesting to me is like that commitment kind of piece, right? Where it's like, if I've chosen to commit to this person, it's very similar to the commitment that a parent has made, just, Russian roulette. They don't get their baby and it's like, oh, your ears are too big. I don't like this one. I'm good with that. So it's like, in that regard, where it's this kind of unconditional sort of scenario, I think people haven't wrapped their heads around having that same kind of unconditional approach to a person that you also share an attraction with, right? Like,
and to that, just a little note is that, when I look at everything that we have now, we do have this defined term as echo chamber. And I always think too, that if you have everybody in your life is like, men are terrible or Black women don't like me, I think that maybe there's something about, have you ever checked the counter to that? And because when we're looking at our political climate and how people can just get fixed on one version of a story and they don't do their due diligence to do some research to counter it. We always talk about the hypothesis and the theory. No one's doing the research to counter or to disprove their theory in order to prove it right. Because your theory may be right, but did you find the evidence that supports, that
the contrary,
that supports the contrary?
Which brings us all the way back to how we started with the aspect of parents who do the research to see that there is a chance for your child, your family member, to have a career in the geek world.
Yes. And again,
whether it's video games or
a lucrative career.
Yeah.
And again, I've met so many people that have
fulfilling. I mean, to go to a convention, and this is my like humble brag that I always like, to go to a convention after Natasha had worked on Miles Morales, and she worked on some of the murals, including that Black Lives, the BLM mural that went kind of viral. And to go to a convention, see folks cosplaying as Miles, and then kind of explain to them, oh yeah, I actually work at this studio, and to see them like gush over Natasha at that point, right, is like, I don't know exactly what it means to her, but like, even for me, just on the outside looking at it, like, oh my gosh, this is like a moment that people don't know that they could even achieve, right? They could be that person behind the, you could be that Jack Kirby, you could be that Stan Lee that someone is in awe and enamored by because of the things you create and make, and not just
Dwayne Duffy.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Right. And I think too, we just, there's still that noise of video games or these comic books or movies are too violent or too corrupting,
their kids things,
or their kids things, and I think it's just kind of finding evidence to disprove that and prove why they can be good. And again, I think, and I'm always like, people talk about how violent video games can make them. And I'm just like, but I'm a person who plays video games and has been playing video games through the numerous iterations and seeing how they've evolved. And it's just kind of like, but I don't have these violent tendencies. So where does this evidence lie? Where do these habits form? And, are we thinking about like the home life, the settings, the circles? Like there's so many other things that shape a person outside of just the media they consume.
Exactly. So where should people contact you if they want to start getting those behind the scene tours to start seeing what's possible at Disney or Insomniac or the like?
So my handle is LUVUSAGI, and that is Love Usagi, which is love rabbit in Japanese. And I'm on, that is my handle for pretty much every platform, PSN, Xbox, Twitter, Instagram. And so you can follow me. And also I'm Natasha Lee Hooker on LinkedIn if you'd like to, get connected there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start with the LinkedIn and work my way back then. I'm David Hooker, David P. Hooker, but you should easily find me on LinkedIn if you type in David Hooker Disney in your search bar. I don't know if that's not but then on any social media, all my handles are Hooktastic. So that's H00K TASTIC. And not so much on the Twitter, just gonna be honest, and probably not gonna be a lot on it.
Yeah.
We'll see where, for those of us who are now listening to this, we'll see where the Twitter,
We'll see where it goes, right?
where Twitter is at that particular time when this airs, compared to where it is right now.
Or maybe not.
Yeah. All righty. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to do this, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to our next time we're on a panel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist here in California. I want to thank you for listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, and have fun out there, play games, find those people you have a great connection with, and know that there is much more under the sun than what you thought. So stay tuned and have a good day.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.